We'll get started here. We'll call this meeting of the Jamestown City Council work session of Monday, September 18th to order. The clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sheldon. Here. Brackman. Here. Karuba. Here. Reynolds.
Present.
Faulkner.
Here.
Russell.
Here.
DeVersa.
Here.
Eklund. Here. And President Jones.
Here. And at this time, we'll give people from the public a chance to address the council. Is there anybody here that would like to address the council? You got 5 minutes. Please give your name and address.
Doug Champ, 225 Bowling Street, Jamestown, New York. I want to talk tonight, I did that at the Finance Committee because that's where the money starts. But this is where the money ends in terms of voting for up or down. The debt service schedule. I strongly recommend that the community be told what the difference is between a bond anticipation note and a bond. Because most people don't get that process and how it works. And the correlation between the coupon effect of where the interest rate goes up and goes down. It's important that they understand what you are obligating this community for. Now, the activities that are presented tonight raise a question as to why they're put together at this point in time, or there's some form of urgency, I suppose. But the American Rescue Plan could easily have funded all of these. I mean, it was an eligibility criteria. It could have been done. I know there's other priorities, but you got $28.1 million 4 years ago, and that's dwindling away. However, when you bond at a city, you bond and indebted the future of the people. None of you will be here. I hope you'll be all alive, but you won't be sitting in those chairs in 2048. That's when this all ends, 2048, 25 years from now. So those kids that aren't born but they want to live here are going to have a debt. Is the debt warranted or not? It's up to you. But when you explain what it's cost, the $6,900,000, it's not that. It's what the interests are on top of that. So when you stretch this out over that period of time, the principal and interest payment, or just the interest payment, according to your schedule, that's the administration schedule, is $5.1 million, just in interest. Almost close to what you're asking for. Then we come and stretch this out, and the total cost is what you should be talking to the community about. It's over $12 million. $12 million. Bonding is, in some regards, the last resort financing anything. Because you do it on a long-term basis because you don't have the money up front, much like buying a home, unless you can afford to pay for it, cash. We can't do that here. We're different. So my question is this: why is this all of a sudden laid on City Council in terms of voting up or voting down when the American Rescue Plan, some of the money's still available, maybe some of it's not spent, because this all costs money to do. The American Rescue Plan otherwise was not that way, wasn't set up. Maintenance and operation costs continue with your investments. You're hoping that the return on investment from the private sector comes back, has a multiplication factor in terms of job creation and tax base, all remaining to be seen. But this is true fact. This is interest upon principle. So if you all want to go out to the community and knock on doors and say, vote for me, then you should tell them what this is going to cost them and why. I'm not saying this stuff isn't important, but it's up for you to devise a mechanism as to what the return on investment in bonding is. Is it a good project, a bad project? Everything is probably good to some people, but in some respects, don't tell the public what the costs aren't unless you tell them what the overall costs are. So 25 years from now, if you go with this formula, gonna cost $12 million plus. What will happen then? What will happen over that 25-year cycle? And by the way, you're putting together a budget, and when the American Rescue money's all gone, the budget process of the city's budget will be totally different than what it has been the last 3 or 4 years, because you had an influx of money. So now you're gonna have to live on your own, whatever that may be. Will the tax value of the city go up? Will people spend more money? You got more sales tax? All question mark. Nobody knows that. But what I do know, based on this, that those people who want to stay here are going to be paying for this investment $12 million, not $6. So when you do this, make sure they understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the council? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. We do have a presentation tonight by Twan Hinders, so you're up.
All right.
I told him he had 2 minutes.
I'll give you my 5. No. I have no voice left because my kids are back in school and they bring all kinds of stuff back besides homework. Apologize in advance.
I feel your pain.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for having me in. I wanted to just go back to previous conversations we've had about restoring and activating the Chattacoin River. And I purposely put these pictures on the front cover here, because these are the gardens by the BPU, which was really the first of a restoration project that kind of kicked off this whole process in 2016. It started. So fast forward 7 years, we're actually really expanding the way we're looking at the river and the way we can actually sustainably restore the river. And this is kind of, in my mind, sort of a pilot version of how the whole river could be looking going forward as we sort of hopscotch over the worst of the worst sections of the river here. It's a section of the river that is using living shoreline principles, so we actually have vegetation there, native vegetation that helps to actually increase the nature value of the city and the river. It helps the river, it helps all animals, the plants that live in there, but it also helps all the people that live around here because it also gives us, the cooling from the shade and evaporation from the plants and all that, all far better than just having lawn there. And the boxes that you see in the front actually are servicing the stormwater system off of Steel Street, so all of the stormwater that used to rush over the surface of that bank right there and would take away the sediment with it every time it would rain. It would actually cause the banks to collapse, are now collected in these boxes and gradually fed out, filtered through the plants, through the roots, through the soil. So by the time all our stormwater that contains all the contaminants from the roads actually makes it into our Chattacoin River, nature has already fixed it for us, and it does it 365, 24/7, and does it really nicely and quietly, and looks pretty good doing that. So I wanted you to keep that in mind, and I just wanted to remind you that when we first started these conversations, a year and a half almost ago by now, right? I gave you these numbers to start truly restoring the Chattacoin and primarily trying to get it back to a maintainable level. It was just not maintainable. There was so much debris piled up in these rivers. You look at the pictures there. There were 7-8 foot log jams in the river, just blocking the river, causing it to go in people's backyards, into businesses, into all kinds of areas where the river should not be going. And thanks to an ARPA allocation from City Council, the $277,500, we were able to clear out the entire 3.5 miles of the Chattacoin River from the water dam all the way out to Tiffany Avenue to the Falkner line, pretty much. So I think for the first time in maybe 40, 50 years, the river was actually running uninterruptedly where it was supposed to run. There were places where the river carved out 3-4 channels just by itself, just going around these obstructions. So it was back where it was. Also in 2022, the council awarded an additional grant of $17,600 for actually treating the trees have an infestation that we have along the river corridor. These are invasive trees, invasive plants that have grown all along the river. I'll get back to that in a minute. They're bad in and of itself because they're invasive, but they're particularly bad because they're the primary host plant for spotted lanternfly. And that is really a pest that we were trying to avoid getting here. So far we've been in the clear, but once these bugs run out of tree of heaven to feed on, they'll switch over to their next preferred crop, which is grapes and apples. And you can imagine what that would do to our economy if our grape industry would be impacted by that. And I'll show you a little bit of what is happening all around us. After that work was done in 2023, so this year earlier, JLDC, also through approval from City Council, awarded monies to actually remove the navigational hazards, those spiky logs that were sticking out of the basin that were a hazard to potential recreational users, and a whole bunch of other debris that was in the Chattaquin River basins upstream from the dam. And monies were also awarded to restore several sections of critically unstable riverbank, primarily the section below the train station and both sides of the river between the Warner Dam and the Main Street Bridge. So the initial removal of the navigational hazards has been completed. So we did this earlier in the spring. You can see the befores and after. All of the hazards that were visible at low water have been removed. With minimal impact, we were able to do this with minimal use of equipment to get all of these out at the lowest water levels possible. So there is no more risk at all for any kind of navigation of boats in basin at any point if they'll be hitting any of these objects. The only thing we kept in there is, there's a huge log. We've had some discussions about that is embedded in the basin there. That might have some potential historical value at some point that we might be able to raise and actually preserve and kind of tell the story of the old logging and furniture industry that was happening here. So we've left it there because it's not posing a hazard to any kind of navigation. But also if you would actually remove it from the water, it would be exposed to oxygen and it would start to rot. So we're just leaving it where it's safest right now until, if we ever have the plan of that. The section of bank that I mentioned that we'll be restoring this fall are the section below the train station. You see those trees that are sort of teetering on the edge of the bank right there. I can't believe they're still standing. All of those unfortunately need to come out and we need to rebuild this entire bank. But in a very similar fashion to what I just showed you in the first slide. So that's sort of the first step, to actually use that living shoreline principle. Other sections are, the section below Jamestown Cycle is probably 7 feet tall. It's just constantly caving in, On the opposite side, you'll see the old foundations. You can actually see, based on these pine needles right here, this is the rack line. That's where the high water mark is actually sitting. It's actually above the retaining walls of our river. So we're not even able to keep the river where it's supposed to be going. And sections that just continually keep washing away are constantly being band-aided by just dumping rocks in the hole, but it doesn't actually fix the whole system. So we're currently waiting for the final DEC permit to see if they require a mussel permit or not, or a mussel survey to actually get started on this work. And we're also waiting on final decision on when the Warner Dam will open for the winter, because right now, with the dam closed, water is being held back in the basin. The water of the river is low, so that would give us a chance to work there easily without having to deal with high water. As soon as the dam opens, we can switch everything around. The water in the basin will drop, and we can restore the upper sections there. Tentative date for that is October 20th, but I just heard this afternoon that there's potentially a plan by the county executive to actually kick that out another 10 days. So we're kind of waiting to see when exactly the right time is to do this. But all of these bank sections will be restored before year end. Now the main reason why I'm here today is that, a year and a half has passed since we actually went through the river and cleared all the debris out of the actual bed of the river. Mostly dead stuff that had been there for some time. And stuff happens, like this is a tree that just recently came down on Allen Street that's blocking the river right now. There are trees on the river that are leaning into the river but are still alive. Keep in mind that, like I mentioned just earlier, that the Warner Dam was actually closed almost a month early this year to retain water in Stockwell Lake to make sure that recreation can happen there. And there's now a push going on to push this out to keep it closed for almost another month and a half. So the water level that we see in the Chattaquin River right now, that we've been seeing all year pretty much, is the lowest it will ever be. But literally overnight, as soon as that dam opens, the water will jump right off and Stockwell Lake will start draining and start hitting those kind of obstacles. So for now, we're still good. As long as the Warner Dam is still closed, these are issues, but they're not real issues until the water level suddenly comes up. And and the river starts to find its way around these obstacles again. So, we went through the river again. There's about 120, trees that actually require attention. They're still standing right now, but need some trimming, pruning, branches taken off, or actually taken out altogether in a controlled fashion. And there are about 13 to 15 trees that are kind of like the one on the right, that are already creating issues at the low water levels and will just exponentially get worse as soon as the dam opens up. So as you've seen in the package that I submitted, we would like to request $175,000 to address those 130, really 145 trees that are in that 3.5-mile section of the Jamestown Chattacoin, ideally before the Warner Dam opens up and creates even bigger problems. I don't know if anybody has had a chance to visit the Deming Drive Jamestown container site in Falconer that I emailed everybody about. I don't want to scare you, but I just want you to see what can happen if we're not proactively managing these kind of issues. The issue with this particular site was that a little tree right here was rooted in the bank and caught some debris, so it made a little bit of a dam right here. When we brought it to the attention in Falconer that they needed to get a permit and get that removed, it was probably a $15,000 job to do that. On January 28th this year, this humongous tree, this big oak tree, fell over and pretty much perfectly aligned with this obstacle right here. And the river, rather than actually going around it, decided to go behind this tree. So this root ball, which is probably about this tall, is where the bank was in January. In March, the dam closed, so we haven't even had any real pressure from the water in the river that does any damage. But again, here too, October 20th, or whenever the dam opens, the water is going to be rushing through here. This is all washed away. The river carved out its own path right here. There's probably a 25-foot gap there. Just dozens and dozens of metric tons of sediment have washed away. And you can see the erosion taking place. You can kind of see back here, this is the driveway for Jamestown Container Port. There's absolutely nothing left of this bank right now that will hold that bank in place. This job alone will require $60,000 worth of rock just to stabilize the bank. That's just the rock, that's not even the labor. The work that we did last week, you can see the bottom right, we actually got all the debris out. It was about a $60,000 job, and the county kicked in probably $30,000 worth of equipment and operator time. But we haven't even begun stabilizing the bank. So again, as soon as the Warner Dam opens, all of this will just actively wash away, and we'll have a major business in town that will likely not be able to use their driveway anymore and get in there. So when you think about one tree causing $150,000 plus worth of damage literally overnight, clearing out 3.5 miles of the river for a little bit more than that seems like a pretty smart move as far as I'm concerned. Going back to Tree of Heaven, in 2022, about a year ago exactly, we had contractors actually stem inject the Tree of Heaven. My initial request was based on what I thought was about 1,200 trees of Tree of Heaven along the river. We ended up treating over 3,500, and amazingly, almost all of them died, which never happens in invasive removal. Like, you do not get like 100% success rate overnight pretty much, but almost all of them didn't make it through the winter, and they're all dead right now. So the situation we're in right now is that 90% of our Tree of Heaven is gone from the city, but because these trees have been here for several years, even though the standing trees that were treated last year are dead right now, they've been dropping seeds for years, however long they've been here. So the seed bank's coming up, so all these young plants are coming back up again. And there may be about 20 trees that didn't quite completely die that need to be retreated to make sure that those are finished off as well. So we would like to request some ARPA funding as well to do this retreatment and make sure that we go through this again. The reality of these things is if we don't do anything right now and we wait 10 years, we're back to square one pretty much. Like, we have a chance right now to get ahead of this infestation. And also because a lot of the larger trees are dead now, those need to be removed. So last year the funding was truly just for injecting the chemicals into these trees, but now we also need a little additional money to also remove those trees. As you can tell, we've been working with GPS to get students involved in some of the removal. So the section that is actually being treated on the left, you can see students this summer happily working to actually remove some of the smaller stuff that they can safely do to get them involved. This was a great collaboration with the fire department and JPS, and this great group of students that probably removed about 400 dead tree of heaven stalks and made this giant bonfire. And at the last day of their work parties, they all made s'mores for all the firefighters. So that was really great. The one holdout, though, that I do need to bring to your attention is that this is the section of the railroad bank between 2nd and 3rd Street. So below Pace's Pizza. Yeah, Pace's Pizza is right here. All of those trees that you see in that picture are all tree of heaven. Some of them are monsters. There's a huge one towering over Pace's Pizza. Those are all on railroad property, and last year we could not get permission to actually treat those, so we were unable to actually work with the railroads to get in there and do anything. So regardless of the fact that just about all of the tree of heaven from the Chautauqua and River Valley have been immobilized and killed in the last year, there's still an island of these trees that is still on railroad property. I started a conversation finally with the railroad, haven't really come to a agreement yet on this, but I just wanted to put that in there, and I put it in the proposal too, just for your awareness that it'll take about $23,000 to make sure that all of those trees will also be removed and actually killed first and then removed in the year after. Just because we still have some of those tree of heaven left in the city, I'm part of the Western New York Prison, the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. And I run all of the early detection traps for spotted lanternfly here in the area, and so far we've come up clean. I just got this update last week. There's been one spotted lanternfly found in Buffalo, in the same spot where there was one last year. The closest spots by now in New York State are Syracuse and Binghamton, but New York City this year has been overrun with spotted lanternflies, and it is coming up from south of us, from Pennsylvania. This is a picture a friend of mine took in Pittsburgh this summer. Those are all dead spotted lanternflies just covering the sidewalks.
Were there people were walking down just?
Yeah, it's like walking on like potato chips. It's friction. Yeah, New York City is in similar state. So the pattern we've been seeing is that you get a few for year one, and then it looks like you're okay, and then suddenly like they just explode. So I'm kind of anticipating that Buffalo will probably start to get them next year. Hopefully not at these kind of levels just yet. And the last sort of aspect of this request is really about the future of the river in the long term. And I just wanted to show you this little video I shot last year. This is obviously right by the Warner Dam, between the Warner Dam and Main Street, broad daylight, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, he's snacking.
He's snacking on the trees. So even though we're a tree city, there really aren't that many trees left along the river. And the few trees that are left that are not invasive species, that are not worth for beavers to chew on, are now specifically targeted by these beavers. We have a massive population of beavers right in the city. You know, they're being trapped. But you're watching the few trees that we have left actively being killed by nature. It's kind of ironic that we're like improving the health of the river and now nature is fighting back. But the reality is really that for so long we've had all these invasive species just run rampant and just cover the entire banks of the rivers. And most of those are invasive and colonize these areas so quickly because they grow really fast and have really soft wood, and they're not interesting to beavers to chew on. So they're specifically targeting these kind of bigger trees that are 20, 30, 40, sometimes 60, 70, 80 years old. So as part of this sort of larger holistic restoration effort that we're doing, obviously every time we restore a section of bank, there will be replanting of trees, but even the biggest trees that we can plant now will be, what, 2 inches in diameter or so, and will take 30, 40, 50 years to reach these sizes. So rather than focusing on buying more trees and planting more little trees and hoping they're going to make it for the next several decades, I think we really need to protect the trees that we have that are still standing in the city. And the great thing is, that is the cheapest, most cost-effective way to do. You just wrap them in chicken wire, and the beavers can't get to them anymore. So included in this ask, I also included a $9,000 ask to actually purchase just a lot of chicken wire, hardware cloth, and I would like to commit more time to getting young people and other community groups involved to just really take an active role in protecting our river and building a community around this river. because it's the only way people are truly going to care and going to realize what's actually happening out there. These are trees that are still alive, but they're irreplaceable. You can't plant 80-year-old trees out there. You just can't. So everything we do right now, every single little tree that we plant right now will benefit our city 2 generations from now, right? It's going to take 2 human generations to get to those kind of size trees again. So why not put a little bit of money and a little bit of effort towards protecting what's still there, so that we're also not like dropping these trees in the river and create more flooding issues there. So, in conclusion, this is the request that I put in front of City Council in hopes that you would be willing to invest another ARPA allocation to do the follow-up of all the work and all the investments that have been made this year already. I have a little bit extra grant money left to put towards the treatment of the Tree of Heaven, but I just wanted to let you know that since City Council awarded the first ARPA allocation in 2022, the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy has raised over $180,000 in external grants to bring in that we can only do by leveraging the monies that have been invested already. At this point in time, there is an additional $490,000 of grants that are pending that we've done in collaboration with Soil and Water Conservation District or together with the city, with Paula. Again, opportunities that would not have been possible without these investments. So, and I didn't bring the numbers, but if I go back to 2016 when we started the first restoration project with the Gardens by BPU, project that I personally have been involved in, we've brought in, I think close to $1.4 million, and more than half of that has been external funding that did not come from the city. So it's almost like a one-on-one match in terms of the monies that have been invested by the city versus the actual benefit you get from that. And I'd like to say too that all of the funds that have been awarded to the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy are only used to pay local contractors and buy local materials, so all the money gets invested in the community and it just circulates. So this is not a one-off investment, this is money that just keeps generating more money. I know ARPA money is going to run out at some points, but knowing that already before the end of this year we have almost $500,000 worth of grant requests out, you know, we're going to keep leveraging these different projects until we finish the entire river. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me just pitch this again. And just know that none of this would have happened without your support in the past. And hoping that we can continue to do it.
Thanks.
Also happy to answer questions if anybody
Just
has
a
any.
comment that,
The presentation shows the work that's been done over the last few years, and ironically, I think they were the first awarded,
Yeah,
uh,
I think so.
stuff, and probably gonna be the last, close to it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that the work is, I mean, obviously important and stuff that we'd never, ever be able to pay for.
And keep in mind too that, you know, I would say we're this close to having the Chautauqua River be maintainable. We're not quite there yet because everything that was done in the first push was really just to remove decades worth of debris that was clogging the riverbed. Now the second pass would be more focused on living trees that are still on the banks but that have the same risk of falling over in places and times where we don't want them to do that, and you have a flogging situation in your hands overnight pretty much. So if you can get ahead of that and keep an eye on where maintenance is needed, and you can see like the amount of investment needed every year to just make sure that the river stays safe and healthy just keeps dwindling, keeps going down. So the more you can still do while the money is still available, the easier it will be going forward to do this. And just so you know too, I did receive a contract from the county to develop a new master plan for the major waterways in the county. And right now the major waterways are just the Martin Cop waterway system, which is Colorado Creek and Casadega Creek. But the intent and the funding is there to actually include the Chautauqua River into the major waterways for the county, with the hopes that once we have the Chautauqua open, and we're about a third of a mile away from the confluence with Casadega Creek, where we've made it actually like open and safe enough to kayak right now. So once that's open, essentially you can connect Chautauqua Lake to the Martin Cop waterway. So these beautiful, like 50-some miles of beautiful, canoeable, fishable, enjoyable waterways. So you're adding an entire economic development opportunity right there, because you have suddenly an activated river going right to the middle of the city that could be activated not just downtown, but anywhere along the length of the river at that point. So the plan will be finished next year, but just know that the Chautauqua will be an integral part of this. So obviously hinges on the fact that the Chattaquin will also be navigable at that point, otherwise it won't be possible to get kayaks out there, of course.
If we connect those waterways, like you were just saying, would that change anything or open up any possibilities for more state funding because we've connected those waterways?
Yes, yes. So right now, most of the funding, other than city ARPA funding, has been county funding, that tax occupancy tax county funding. The limit of where those funds can be applied stops at the Warner dams. So Stockwell Lake all the way to the Warner dams. Upstream from the dam is eligible for county funding and occupancy tax funding. Anything downstream from the dam, no funding ever. There's nothing available for that. But if the Chattaquin River would become part of the Martin Cobb Waterway Trail System, which is a county park, there are allocations for maintenance to maintain those waterways. Now, just like with the Chattaquin, that just hasn't happened for the last several decades, and it's a mess out there. But we're working on that right now too. Andy Udell is on the appropriation committee at the state level, and he has some pull to actually increase the funding for county park maintenance. So if the Chattaquin would become part of the Martin Cobb Waterway system, there could potentially be funding available for that.
Juan, are you doing any dredging?
We are not, no.
Because there's a couple of areas upstream, starting at the city line at Clifton, that's almost choking the river off,
Yeah,
where you can't even, I mean, yeah, kayaks and canoes, but some motorboats aren't gonna make it through there.
no, and you're absolutely right. And this actually, this is a totally different conversation that needs to be had. I just met with Andy Goodell and George Borello about this last week to just at least try to get at the right level the DEC's attention. But what is happening right now with the Warner Dam and how it's being kept closed longer to make sure that Stockwell Lake has enough water to do the recreational activities there extremely negatively impacts what happens downstream from the dam. Because as soon as they close the door, especially in a dry year like this,
Yeah.
there's no water left. So dredging wouldn't help that. There's just, the DEC can determine how much water should be going through the Chattaquin. But the entire rule curve that exists right now that maintains the opening and closing of the dam is about as hands up as it gets. It's all for flood control. So the DEC, who's in charge of directing how the dam opens, they literally open it once a year and close it once a year. Whatever happens in between is not really their concern, but we have to make it their concern, and it needs to come from the highest level. So rather than dredging the river, which is super costly and brings all kinds of other challenges with it, I think a conversation with the DEC and trying to revisit this ancient rule curve and trying to actually have more water release from the dam so that the water level comes up would be a much more efficient way to do it. It wouldn't cost anything. You just have to change the dam schedule pretty much. The other thing that comes with that too is that when the dam is kept closed from April through almost November, it means that that entire time there's stagnant water in the Chattaquin River Basin, right? So all these economic initiatives that are coming right now, all these grants that are being spent on the basin, have not factored into the fact that this stagnant water grows harmful algae blooms. Last year, the whole basin was just paint green for a month, just because the dam was closed so that there was enough water in Stockwell Lake to do what needed to be done. So there's a number of reasons why the rule curve needs to be revisited. I just don't even know how to get the DEC to start thinking about this, but I'm hoping that we can keep pushing in that direction at least.
The conversations you're having with the railroad in that area where the tree heaven is, I mean, is it just a matter of connecting with them, or do you think are they being resistant to removing the trees from that area? I mean, do you have a positive, do you think there's gonna be a positive outcome to remove those?
I hope so. I think so. It's more communication than I've had in probably 10 years with them, so that's encouraging. Their standard MO is that they're actually willing. I talked to Dan Stone about this last week. He's dealing with similar issues. The railroad now at least is somewhat communicative, and you can actually work with them, but their standard MO is that for every day that you work on railroad property, you have to pay for a flagman to be with you to just make sure they're like flag down the train. And there's a permit fee, so essentially they're actually charging anybody who would do work on their property beyond what it already costs to do the work. Obviously they have a responsibility, I think, to just do it themselves. They claim to have no money, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. but that's kind of where I stand. They're looking to waive the fees, the additional fees. They're not terribly forthcoming with actual money to actually deal with the problem so far, but hopefully that will change though.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we'll move on to our committee reports. Marie, you wanna do housing first?
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a couple people in the public talking about clarification on the new ordinance, and the issue was when people were decided. They have 5 calendar days, not 5 business days, to correct or address the issue. And basically, the Department of Development will be working with the individuals as long as they are making an effort to try to remediate the problem. So just so that you know, it's not just to try to catch people and find them, it's really to get them to remedy the problem. We are switching from MyGov to Gov Pilot system to report problems. A lot of people mentioned that they've had issues with the MyGov website and reporting complaints because the location identifier has been very difficult to attach. There are other issues. The Gov Pilot system will be able to do much more tracking and more information will be visible, permit issues, and connections, and hope to have this up and running by the end of the month, but right now it doesn't, I don't know. It may be optimistic, but hopeful that this might be the new system by the end of the month, due to the problems they had in the MyGov system. We also talked about some of the questions about when we work, or when we are looking at abatements of issues on properties versus demolition. And the Director of Development spoke about the overall conditions, structures, neighborhood, how much would need to be done to remedy the situation. If it's going to be extensive rehab that probably no one would wish to undertake, it might be looking at a demo versus something that only has some issues and could be remedied, and to keep that a viable neighborhood. Many people may not know, but we now have different colored signs on properties. The orange sign is kind of a dirt, debris, no utilities, and the other colored sign is yellow, and the yellow signs are a do not enter because there are structural issues. So it's also to alert fire department and anyone else if this is a building that is unsafe to be in or on the premises. Questions about the land bank has a separate demo list, but there are properties that are clearly on the list to be demolished. We talked about the new ordinance, and actually the tickets are going to be available on Friday of this week. They are working on the process of how they're implementing it. Legally, these individuals have to be legally served. It may be handed to the individual. It may be a peace officer may be involved. It may be mailed, an affidavit, and also process served, which may take longer. The good news was that the court has now been willing to issue bench warrants, and 6 have been issued, and in working with the nuisance officer, they are going to let people know the fact that you are ignoring and not appearing in court under these circumstances when you've been cited are not going to go unresolved. You can or may be arrested if they can find you. And probably the hours of the nuisance officer more likely to find people at home between 5 p.m. and 1 a.m. in the morning. So it looks like that effort has improved the situation, and hopefully to let people know we are not taking this lightly anymore. We want people to take care of their properties. And I think that was it, unless, Crystal, do you have anything else to add? Yep, that was great. Thanks.
Okay. Questions? Thanks. We'll move on to finance.
We had a lot of discussion and not a lot of resolutions approved, unfortunately, but the first resolution was to lift the hiring freeze to hire a full-time senior account clerk. This position is vacant due to a retirement, and on 6/26/2023, we suspended the hiring freeze for a part-time position. the complaint or issue is that they're having a hard time finding a part-time person, so the request is to go to a full-time. The budget cost that was provided in this resolution was $65,926.54. I asked for an explanation of the difference between what was approved at part-time versus, not an explanation, but a variance amount of what was approved at the full part-time and what would be the difference to go to full-time, because again, this is a budget increase. So we're looking for that information. Resolution number 2 is that the mayor of the city of Jamestown being he hereby is authorized to enter into agreement with Child and Family Services of Buffalo, New York to provide the EAP program for the employees of the city of Jamestown at a cost of $26 per employee annually for the period of November 1st, 2023 to October 31st, 2024, subject to the approval of the Corporation Council as to form. Also note that this contract includes the BPU and juror employees who are billed back for the services based on the number of employees. From Elliot explained that there were 4 proposals and this was the one chosen based on the criteria required for the city. So we approved that. I don't know, Elliot, if you wanted to say anything else or if that covers it.
Yes, the main criteria that was looked at was 24-hour access to constant care for our employees and those of the VPU.
Resolution number 3 and 4 relate to the discussion with the bond resolution, number 3 being 5.9 million and number 4 being 1 million. We had a series of questions. The one that Marie had in particular was the window. It still says 350,000. Was that for energy efficient that she had asked for, or is that still just the 6 as they stand? The 6 as they stand?
I think we were trying to secure a firm to give us some information about the windows.
I really would like that because again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but these windows are just becoming impossible to replace with that film. We gotta start at some point to get energy efficiency in this building. I mean, I'm looking at these, are all stained, they're terrible.
I'll add something to that. I had a call from someone that delivered all this glass 40, 50 years ago and mentioned that it was a high-tech process to give it this color, and over the age, the color changes. He indicated it would probably be near impossible to match what's in the building now. And he also thought there was what they called an attic supply, meaning there's replacement glass for either broken or damaged, that somewhere there was an excess number of glass panels that were available, and he called it attic, which would be overflow, but they're not in an attic, they might be in some warehouse somewhere. But he cautioned not being able to match the glass, number 1, and number 2, at $21,000 a panel or whatever the 17 panels worked out to was outrageous. Where did the number come from? Was there one quote? Was there an estimate? What was?
There's only one
There's only one
company that does
company.
this, and you gotta wait till there's a batch big enough for them to even produce the windows
Is
again.
there a local contractor?
No.
No?
Well, we source them typically from DNS.
Yes.
DNS
But
Glass.
the company that actually makes them is somewhere else, they're not here.
He thinks they were made in Europe,
Yeah.
and he wasn't sure that, I can share his name
That'd be great,
with you to
yeah.
have,
Appreciate it.
maybe put him on a committee or have him get involved. I'll be happy to share that with the administration.
Before he goes to Florida? Cause that is soon.
Oh, we better let him go. No, that just was some really good highlights and good points that he brought to my attention, not knowing where the number came from, so.
If you could share that, that'd be great.
Yeah,
He worked for Falconer Plate as their salesman for years.
yeah.
Has anyone approached, and not to match what we have here, but has anyone approached Hope's Windows at all? Has anyone had conversation with them?
Not yet, but we certainly can.
They don't make
Um,
glass.
They don't make the glass.
You know,
so.
certainly windows were kind of lower on the bond list. The top priority is the roof of City Hall, which does have leaks. But you know, if we want to do some more research with it, we can certainly remove the windows from the bond. Just, you know, that we saw this as an opportunity to replace some of the windows, especially on the 5th floor, that have been broken. So
Well, even in the council chambers, those windows all along that wall
Yep.
are a mess.
We could talk to Hope, so reach out.
So, question I have is, and please someone jump in if I'm incorrect, but, you know, it's almost like we're talking about a roof and bonding for a roof. Now that it's leaking, why weren't we having extensive conversations on this, you know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when we had large sums of ARPA funding? I think that, I guess if I would have known that it was that large of a problem,
Mhm.
I would have been more concerned about that than a splash pad or some of these other projects. So I guess I'm just throwing it out there. I know it's too late, but I know.
Maybe not. I brought that up many times because every time I come in off the Prendergast Avenue side and there's a hole in the ceiling and water dripping down in a bucket there, I said, why are we not dealing with this? And I know it has to do with the terrace, but I can't tell you how many times I have brought that issue up. Why are we not taking care of this building, including the windows, including the roof, all of that, and the leaks?
Sure.
Go back and look. I mean, I'm just saying, it's been a thorn to me that when we got money like this, why we haven't used it for these purposes, because we have applied for grants, but this building has been let go for far too long in terms of taking care of some of the issues. And you're right, we should be looking at that.
One of the things that we asked for too was that, we do have the updated ARPA sheet, and we have roughly, if we do allocate the money for the river project, about 1.2 million left.
Correct.
And so with that, and then also on the other side, there's money left that has been allocated that hasn't been spent to go through to see if there are some other monies here available that could be, rather than X out that program, whatever it is, we're done. If there's some money left in that, to allocate that towards some of these projects, and also the possibility of scaling them back. So even if we do have to bond, we could significantly reduce the total cost of the bond, which would be
Maybe
obviously.
potentially up to, are we talking half?
Just
So-
depends, yeah.
The other thing that I didn't address in finance that I would like to see, I know I've asked, in 2024, we do not have anything bond-wise coming off. So we have that full expense. I guess it would be nice to see the bond plan, so we know what is coming off in what year as well.
I believe I gave that to you all in finance the last time I came in to present the bond, and then you all got a copy of that as well. It was a legal size paper. But to answer your question, Jeff, I think you're absolutely right. We didn't realize the extent of the roof issues until the council approved the engineering survey of the roof, and so we were able to find a lot more issues that would require a full replacement. But I think Marie is also correct. Deferred maintenance on this building has gone for a very, very long time, and we're trying to do our best to repair it and make sure we do it right. So we did try patching, and that was ineffective after the original survey we did. So
I want to give credit, the grant writer has certainly helped out tremendously, but it's just frustrating when you see things that, if this is the building that represents the city, it's embarrassing at times, because it's really not presentable in some areas, and I know I've heard complaints from the people that rent on the 5th floor. They've had numerous leaks and complaints about it for years.
Well, like the council president said, I mean, if we can claw back some of this money that's not being used, some remaining ARPA funding that we do have, and obviously the more that we can put down towards these projects, the less we have to bond. I mean, that only makes financial sense to do something like that rather than, bonding the entire thing out.
I will also note that the bond authorization isn't up to amount, right? And so we don't always take the full bond if there are other grants that come through in that process. So each year when we do the budget, we also give you the authorized amount versus how much we've actually drawn down from the grant. If we go too long from drawing down the grant, we typically just put that money back into the payoff of it, so we don't draw it down. But certainly, I think giving you guys this the last couple months, I wanted to make sure that we have this conversation to figure out what, if any, ARPA funds we would like to use going through this process. The grant authorization process takes like 2 months overall, right? So we just want to make sure that we're first on the list for roof repair for this, as well as Fenton, and that does require us to make moves.
On that note, the Fenton roof, was that another bid? Was that another estimate that came through?
We haven't bid it out yet. We wanted to see how much the cost would be first.
The estimate done by a local contractor?
It was, yes.
Jamestown Roofing.
Jamestown Roofing. Yeah, that's right. Brent asked it for a copy of it.
That is not,
That's not-
they're not going with, as far as I know, they're not going to do a rubber roof, because the
That
problem
estimate's
they're
only a
having is
million.
what? That's a rubber roof, and they did not wanna go with a rubber roof, because the issue is that the rubber roof, getting it stretched and the cost of $1 million to just do a rubber roof is not going to hold up. So they looked at a metal roof, and I believe that's what the preference was, because the rubber roof, every time they fix it, it's leaking in another area.
The way that roof is,
What?
the way that roof is, a metal roof isn't really viable.
They didn't think they could do it?
No, because the gutters are actually built into the roof itself, and with a standard seam roof, those gutters just don't work.
Okay, cause that was my understanding, that
Yeah.
they wanted to do
They
that.
did, they requested that from, we talked to Jamestown Roofing about that option as well, and they said it's just,
Well, that's $1 million difference, though.
That's $1 million, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's $1 million different.
But did they get, because I thought they got other estimates on it as well, I don't think that was not the only estimate.
Yeah, it didn't include, I think, some of the other repairs that have to go into the roof. That's correct. Yeah.
Fuel replacement, chimney repair and downspouts were not in the
I believe our engineers estimated that about 500,000, and then an additional 500,000 in contingency just because of the historic nature of the building.
And we are working on applying for grants with the Fenton. Yep.
So, because 4 is linked to, resolution 3 and the bond will go for the same amount, we wanted to get those answers before we approve that. So moving on to resolution number 5, is that the mayor, and he hereby is authorized and directed to enter into a contractual agreement with Stark Tech Group for the illumination of Main Street Railroad Bridge and Viaduct, utilizing ARPA funds in the amount not to exceed $45,712.50, subject to the approval of the corporation council as to form. One question we had, I know there was other questions by other council members about going out to bid, and Crystal, you brought that stuff for us that we didn't have in finance, so, I guess this $45,712.50 was included on a June resolution? Okay.
I
So
believe
this
it's
isn't requesting any additional ARPA funding. It's requesting to, do a change order basically with, Stark Tech, who did the Riverwalk illumination project.
So are these going to be colored lights?
Yes.
I
It
thought,
would tie into the system that is already on the Riverwalk.
I personally thought the discussion was to get security lights as soon as possible.
Well, so, we can talk about that because that ties into some of the questions that Councilman Russell and Faulkner had.
Okay.
If we don't do the colored lights now, it's not going to happen there, so it will be simply white lights. I know that Councilman Russell is going to call, I'm not a lighting expert, so I really don't feel confident in speaking to how all of that works, but, I suggested, having a conversation with Chris Selstrom at the BPU, who has kind of been, our point person, and, certainly understands it a lot better than I do. We did have a lot of conversation about cost, and the determination is if we do just the white lights, the security lights, that's what we have. But we have an opportunity, and we've invested a great deal of money into the Riverwalk lighting and the Riverwalk itself and that space, the viaduct. While yes, safety is priority number one, we also have an opportunity to activate it, which also lends itself to the safety. And with it being the transition space between downtown and the Riverwalk trailhead, we wanted to make sure we didn't miss that opportunity. But ultimately, that will be up to all of you.
The way you described it to me prior to the meeting was that it's two completely different systems. And I'll talk to Chris more about it. I
Yeah.
plan on giving him a call and, picking his engineering brain.
Yes.
But it sounds like it's two different systems, so if we go with just security lighting now, it's not like you can daisy chain the system
Correct.
into
I
that white
understand
security
as
system. And I know there's been a long-term plan even prior to this administration, other administrations, to develop that waterfront. And obviously we're putting money into Wituan and cleaning it up, so it's kind of an all or none type thing. But I'll talk to Chris more about it, and then also possibly look at other quotes. I guess I don't feel comfortable with just reaching out to one company. It's kind of like when you get a medical diagnosis, you don't always take the first doctor's word for it. Sometimes you go out and you get a second opinion. So I'd kind of like to see a second opinion on this as well. But I'll have more conversation with Chris. I'll come back to the council and let everyone know what he says.
Is there a stipulation with ARPA that if for a project over like $10,000 it has to have 2 bids? I think I read that a long while ago. No.
This is as long as the regular procurement policy has been followed.
There's definitely a need for security lighting down there. There's a lot of, I guess I should say, there's a lot of activity down there at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. Where if, I guess it wasn't for my former profession, I wouldn't really feel safe being down there in the evening hours. So something needs to be done. I mean, frankly, it's a mess down there. I was down there the other night, and there was a woman that I know who was proceeding to pull all the flowers out of the flower pots, and I proceeded to yell at her and tell her to knock it off. So there's a lot of activity going on down there at night, and one way or another, there needs to be some sort of security lighting in that area. Because it might be nuisance stuff now, but it's gonna turn into things that are a lot worse, criminal behavior. I've brought this up before, that there was an alleged sexual assault that took place down there several months ago. I don't know what happened with that case, but something needs to be done with that area.
Do they regularly patrol down there, the nuisance officer? I'm just asking because I
mean, they're busy. I mean,
well, no, I understand, but I mean, even down around the Fenton property, they've had to have cameras outside, and I didn't know if there were cameras in the vicinity, just because Fenton had issues with people pulling out flowers,
Sure.
camping on the doorstep, taking the newspaper and other things, and so they had to resort to installing a whole camera system.
I mean, obviously that's kind of a choke point, so
Yeah.
everyone's filing through there, between, the square and uptown. So, something needs to be done, at least on the security side.
But just based on Marie's question, Chief Jackson, is that an area that's being patrolled frequently or no?
Main Street,
Viaduct area.
The viaduct
it
area?
has to be patrolled, so one of the only ways to get to the police station.
I guess while you're, I just want, because we're talking about that, has that lighting and all, because of lighting and the security at the parking ramps, has that alleviated most of the problems there?
We've made, I want to wanna say about, off the top of my head, at least 20 arrests because of the signs that have been put up for trespassing, for people trespassing in the parking ramps. Off the top of my head, I don't believe that we've had any criminal mischief complaints since we put the signs up and started making arrests. And that's just off the top of my head, I could be wrong, but.
No, I appreciate that, just given the concern of the people that came in, I'm glad to hear that, thank you.
Marie, just to follow up on that, the DPW is starting the bid out process for it as well, I believe. Yeah.
It doesn't open up, and I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, just for clarity, this total project cost is $111,875, $145,712.5 will come from the ARPA.
I still think we had, excuse me, Jeff, but I think we had the discussion to prioritize the lighting and set a dollar amount around $45,000. And, if we could modify it at some point in time, put color lights up or get a new system down the road, we can look at it then, but I feel strongly that we need to spend the $45 grand and put the white lights up and make it a safe area. I don't like the idea of
So,
all the
just
color.
to clarify, we're not asking for additional ARPA funding.
No, just the 45.
The other money she's saying are CDBG money.
Part of it is coming from
Part of the change.
ETU actually, and then part of it is coming from CDBG.
Thank you.
So if we don't do the colored lighting now, it's not likely to happen because it will be a significantly higher cost in the future. Yep.
What are the other main uses for CDBG money? What does that usually go towards?
This actually, for this project, I believe is coming out of, the bucket that allows us to do public facility type work. There's handicap accessibility, there's, building, we've got, commercial building grant programs, anti-blight initiatives like hands-on neighborhoods and, demolitions. There's a whole bunch of programs that CDBG funds.
So if that was passed, that amount, what does that do to your budget, for that line item for CDBG money?
We have a significant amount in that, public infrastructure right now, so there's not a project that it would take away from that is in the queue. And we have a hard time getting through it quick enough. Every year we're scrambling at the last minute to try to get money spent. We use it a lot of times for road projects, street projects. And we have to use it within a certain time frame. So we've looked into that line item, and we've got the funding that we have available to use. So it would help us meet timeliness required by HUD, and would be able to complete this project in this way.
So you're saying it's not going to take away from anything else? And
Not anything else that was already in the queue.
And if you don't spend that money,
If we don't spend it, we potentially lose it.
Right. But you understand, I'm gonna probably speak for some council members here, maybe not. But, I think some of their concern is the backlash that often happens, it comes from the public. When we put up colored lights and we spend a lot of money doing it, there's people that get upset over that. The public, our constituents, why are you spending so much money on colored lighting when there's so many other things that need to be fixed? So you can guarantee if this project goes forward, that's what we're going to hear.
And I understand that. I think that when we're making decisions on projects, we have to look at the bigger picture, and there's always going to be, looking at the bigger picture, what's the return on the investment and how does it tie into other projects? All of the efforts that we're putting into the Riverwalk and all of the other initiatives, it all ties together. So, part of it is activating this space, and it's not just this space, it ties into some of the other spaces. So we've invested a great deal, and I think that the more that we make our places that we wanna be, the more we get out of them and the more people that are going to use them. And it all comes back together in the end, so, you know, if.
And I don't disagree with a single thing that you're saying, I agree with you 100%. But ultimately, everyone sitting in this room
Always
works,
gonna be somebody that doesn't like what we do.
everyone sitting in this room right now works for the public.
Mhm.
We work for them,
Absolutely.
and we have to answer those
Sure,
difficult questions of why are you doing this?
sure.
The last time we all heard about the colored lights, it wasn't money that could have been used to fight blight that paid for them. That's one of the biggest complaints we get also is the blight. So I just,
Are you talking about the colored lights on the Riverwalk?
yeah. But
So that was not money that could have been
no,
used to
I know,
fight
you're
blight.
saying this CBDG money could be used to fight blight potentially, and if you're struggling to spend it, that's something different. But just,
And it's not as simple as all of that, but I understand. Also remember that when we talk about blight, our anti-blight initiatives, I think probably the biggest that we all wish we had unlimited funding for is demolitions. And we have a limit to what we can do with demolitions. HUD will not allow us to exceed a certain dollar amount. So while yes, blight is a top priority, we can't simply move it to a demolition line because HUD does restrict that.
And I hear what you're saying, we can't be short-sighted. We need to look at the long term, and I know that there's been a long-term plan down there, and some of it has come to fruition. And it obviously looks much better than it has in the past. I understand that you wanna push forward with that vision. Not only this administration, but like I said earlier, prior administrations, there was plans to do that, so I can respect that.
one last thing. Do we see maybe like a ballpark idea of what it would cost through like a local contractor, just for security lights down there, as opposed to everything, just so we can kind of compare? It's gonna be this much for basic, or it's gonna be this much for the fire
Sure, I
protection.
don't know if it's just necessarily like security lights because there's a lot more that goes into it, but I'm not the person to
Right.
ask that question, but I will
That is-
certainly
that's just
try to
basic-
explore that and.
Just basic lighting, just basic white lighting, outdoor fixtures, whatever,
Sure.
just
Yep.
to compare, just so we have an idea.
Yep, absolutely.
Next, we have, resolution 6 and 7 are related, and they relate to the project that Tuan was just here, speaking about. Resolution 6 is resolved that the mayor be authorized to enter into a grant agreement with the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy of Lakewood for Phase 2 of the Chautauqua River project to clear debris from the river and to remove dead trees that may cause further blockages of the river for a total sum of $224,500.00, subject to the approval of the Corporation Council as to form. That was approved, as well as resolution number 7, designating $224,500.00 in the American Rescue Plan Act Water, Sewer, and Broadband funds for the purpose of the Chautauqua River Restoration Project, and that was approved. Resolution number 8 is that K-9 Officer James Latimer and K-9 Grimm be and hereby are authorized to attend the New York State Homeland Security and Emergency Services 2023 Excelsior Challenge to be held in Oriskany, New York from October 2nd through October 6th, 2023. Expenses paid by the Jamestown Police Department pursuant to the Section 77B of the General Municipal Laws of the State of New York, and that was approved. And that was it out of finance.
Okay, thank you. Hold on to public safety, Brett.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had the same resolution that finance did for the 2023 Excelsior Challenge, which is kind of described as the Olympics for bomb sniffing dogs. Sounds like an exciting time there. We approved that as well.
You notice how they included canine grim as part of the request.
Bounce sniffing dog. We have 2 special event permits that we approved. The JHS Homecoming Parade to be held on Friday, October 6th from 5 till 7 p.m., including setup and teardown. There was a question as to who the Red Raiders are playing that day. Any idea, Tom? Bennett's calling.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. That was approved.
Find out right
Yeah. It's an annual event. Second special event permit is the Latino Heritage Celebration to be held on Saturday, September 30th from 11:30 until 4:30, which is actually the setup and teardown times. The actual event runs from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. on West 4th Street between Main and North Main and Cherry Street. With music to be held at the Winter Garden Plaza. That was approved. And last item we had was the annual rabies clinic will be held on Saturday, November 18th from 10 a.m. until 12 noon at the Taylor Training Center on Harrison Street. Dogs, cats, and ferrets are welcome. I believe they must be at least 3 months of age before they get their first shot, and they can get boosters if they were at the clinic last year for free. Always a good event, and something free for the public, preventing rabies in our community. And just one final note from Deputy Chief Coons, the canvas letter has gone out last week to candidates for the 8 FEMA firefighter positions. So we're looking forward to getting responses back, hiring new firefighters. That was it.
Brent, it's Lancaster.
Okay.
Lancaster.
They're playing against Lancaster.
Okay, we're all set. Move on to Public Works. Randy, anything?
Mr. President, we did not have any resolutions for tonight's committee meeting. There was some discussion about the projects that their summer projects are moving along pretty much as planned, and not really any issues, so to speak. Clearance trimming we talked about. The Parks Department is getting to that when they do get a spare bit of time. But something we didn't talk about, I see a lot of the lights are working up on Washington Street now. I think, is it all of them, Mark?
I think all the new lights are.
Yeah, I think they are. I didn't see any bags. Yeah, and as far as the heads that we talked about with Marie before, for the traffic flow monitoring, maybe you get an update for us sometime on that, just to see how that might be coming along.
I don't think they're in yet.
At least the modules aren't in, or the head might not, that might just be the mount that, yeah. I know they had trouble with the modules, getting those.
Well, yeah, we'll take a look. I know there were several components that were still on back
Okay.
order, so
Yeah.
we can take a look at the traffic flow modules.
Some of it's improved, traffic flow is better at times, but today it was backed up in an area with a couple tractor trailers with the one lane, and you couldn't turn and people were blocking the intersection. But it's better.
Is it always rush hour then?
No, this wasn't even rush hour.
No?
This is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
I suppose that's what the one lane, one of the drawbacks is one lane, yeah, so, but, I believe that was it.
Thank you. Anything else for the council before we go to the mayor's report?
I'd like to go back to the Tuan leaders thing with Kim went through both those resolutions. Keep in mind, in the small print, there's $490,000 in grant requests that are outstanding. I'm not sure we should be giving him all the money that he's requesting, with that kind of balance hanging in limbo. I think we need to be a little more frugal, a little more, have a little better handle on our finances. just an opinion.
I guess just one other, thank you for getting McDaniel paved, but there is one toward the top of the street, there is a separation of the blacktop at the very top, I don't know. I walk on it with my dogs and I don't know what's happened, but there's part that's separating toward the top, toward the curb. And it looks like that's not gonna take long before the plow and it's going to rip that out and you're gonna have divots again. So I don't know if you realize that or they realize that, yes. It's toward the top end of Newland, but you don't have to look very hard and it's actually separating. There's a line and a crack where it's separating between the blacktop. It was rolled, but it's coming apart. Okay, thanks.
You're up.
Okay. Well, thankfully, some of my updates you guys already mentioned in your committee, so we'll knock those off the list. That was including the Safer Recruits, canvas letters are going out, and the quality of life tickets. They're starting the internal process there. Just a couple other updates for the City Council. The Ambulance 2 has been ordered, so we are awaiting a shipment date for that. We're also working on Station 5 roofs. We have been working on the roof that partially collapsed, so we had to engage some structural engineering and go through that process. So we're working on trying to get that portion done for Station 5. I also have asked Mark to give you guys an update on the splash pads, because I know there's been some questions about that.
So we got the geotechnical report back for Jackson Taylor Park late last week. With minimum amount of adjusted construction, basically it's a viable site, we can use it. So rather than digging a foot down, they recommend we dig 2.5 feet down and place a structural grid at the bottom of that. And then do some additional drainage work to make sure water stays away from underneath that structure that we build. So in the grand scheme of that project, it's not a large extra cost to build there. The other one is we got the big holdup for installing the splash pad at Allen Park was the installer. So the city's responsible to get the site work ready, but then we have a company come in and install all the actual piping, make sure it's in the right place, that kind of thing. And they gave us a date of the end of October is when they'd be able to come in and do their work. So we decided it was in the best interest of the project to do that in the spring. Get on their schedule early in the spring rather than do that late. Either leave it exposed or pour concrete in November, a large pad in November. So.
For both sites, right?
Well, yeah. Well, Allen Park was the only one we were trying to get on schedule because we just got the geotechnical report last week.
So we'll work on trying to get both sites while they're here with the installer. We also just received all of the equipment not too long ago, right? A couple weeks ago. That was on back order. So equipment is in-house. Installer is scheduled, and we'll try to get the installer to do both sites at the same time in the spring. Any questions on that? All right. Just another update as well. I know this may or may not have been mentioned in housing. Our new code enforcement officers have started their training, so they're going through that process now. So we're hoping to get them through it quickly, or as quick as the state allows us to go, so that we can have those folks out on the streets. Maybe not on the streets, but out working the streets. Maybe that was wrong to say too. But we're excited for them. The last update I just have for you all, and I know this is absolutely thrilling. The budget presentation will be October 6th at 4 p.m. Mark your calendars. It'll be a great time.
Popcorn.
I'll try to bring popcorn. We'll do the best.
We have homecoming that day.
That's all the updates I have. Unless there's any questions.
Nothing.
No executive session. So.
Did everybody get a copy of the letter the mayor sent out? I think you sent it out from Mr. Bogdan. Did that go to everybody?
Mr. Bogdan emailed everybody directly.
Directly. you get it, the
I
letter?
did not get it.
I don't, I'll have to double check.
I'm not sure offhand.
It's, the gist of it is about the, hotelers and, rooms available for migrants coming from New York City. And, so you haven't, I'll read it, it's a real simple letter.
Was that today?
No, it didn't go to everybody.
I didn't
No, I didn't
know
get
what
it.
It went to Marie, it went to the mayor, Marie,
I didn't get it.
Tony,
I got it.
myself,
What time?
Jeff Russell, and Bill Reynolds.
Says I didn't get it. 5:30, okay. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I
That's why I
haven't seen
printed
it.
it, that's not, I don't know.
Oh, okay, I don't know what time.
It's real short, it says, Dear Mayor Sundquist, my neighbors and I are cringing this morning. Are migrants coming to Jamestown? The southern border is wide open. The president and the federal government have failed to stop illegal immigration. As per the Post-Journal, New York City Mayor Eric Adams wants to contractually pay local landlords to displace their current tenants with migrants. We have no capacity for this. It will cause a new crisis to our city, and a huge cost will be placed upon our taxpayers and property owners. Keep policing and public safety the highest priority, and don't let slumlord profiteering run over City Hall. Stand up and support the county emergency order stopping migrant relocations. Sincerely, Ted Bogdan. I think that's a majority of the people I've spoken to and have voiced their concerns about this issue is something we need to address at some point in time. I'm not against having folks move into the city, but we want them to be legal, obviously. And I think the city should take a stand and not accept these folks under the illegal, what I wanna say, that the potential illegalness of their immigration. So I don't know if you hadn't heard that or seen that, Mr. Mayor, but
I have, Bill, actually, we saw it this morning, and I think we responded to Mr. Bogdan. But I think the response first and foremost is that the city hasn't accepted anyone,
right.
nor have we contracted to receive any migrants. Obviously, the county has an executive order currently, and that's being litigated in court. We have no way and have received no contact from New York City on any landlords that we know of that are
Right, there's
negotiating.
rumors that some landlords and operators have been approached. And
It very well could be. We're not aware of that, and at this point, this is the county is currently fighting with the city of New York in order to deal with it. We don't have the resources at this point to manage that. This process of asylum seekers is different than refugees. Refugees are those that receive federal funding to be resettled in a location and have various support services. Our migrant populations, our asylum-seeking populations, do not, right? And they are not able to get work permits, which is one of the biggest things that I have been railing about, which is we've got open jobs, we have ability to fill those jobs, but they're unable to work, right? So we're trying to figure out. We don't have a fight in this. Yeah, we certainly don't, and we haven't accepted one. Although the city had received, and by the city I mean just Jamestown in general, we were made aware of a good number of asylum seekers that had migrated to Jamestown, and way before they started actually sending folks. So.
right. Lots of circumstance in this situation needs our continuous scrutiny as time marches on.
I, like the mayor's saying, I think, there's a difference between individuals that are here as refugees. I know there's some families here in our community that, I've seen the photographs of some of these children, from the Congo that have lived in tents their entire lives. And they don't know anything else but basically living in a tent city. And they're brought, or they come to our country, under the horrible conditions that they've been living in the Congo, on their hands and knees, some of them digging for cobalt, and they're here as refugees. So I can support individuals like that that are running from that type of lifestyle. So I think we just need to be careful on terms, and their status, here in our country. Because ultimately, all of us, through our ancestry, came here.
For sure.
Anything else?
No?
Anything else? No executive sessions. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Meeting adjourned.